analysis. I think you got a little thumbs up.
A memorandum of understanding to reset the relationship between Ottawa and Alberta.
Thank you very much.
A new partnership that earned the Prime Minister 2 standing ovations in Calgary, but unleashed frustration in British Columbia.
It has no root. It has no funding. There is no company that is advocating for it. And it is solely, at this point, a communications exercise from the province of Alberta.
And it ultimately sparked a high-profile resignation from Cabinet. All of it a cause for celebration in the Alberta legislature, where the UCP government took some delight in the political troubles this was causing on one side of this new partnership.
This day is full of incredibly good news. We got rid of the emissions cap, Mr. Speaker. We have a new pipeline coming here to Alberta, and we just learned that Steven Guilbeault has resigned from the federal cabinet. So good news all around, Mr. Speaker. Simply.
Okay, there's a lot to dig into with our party insiders at the end of a pretty busy week. Fred Delory is a former Conservative campaign manager. He's in the Christmas spirit today. And here with me, Greg McEachern is a former Liberal ministerial advisor, and Melanie Richer is a former communications director for the NDP. Okay, we're not pipeline experts, I don't think, but we do have a sense of how things can play out politically. And Greg, let's start with the Liberals. Good week on balance, a bad week on balance, too soon to tell. Where do you think you are as of right now?
I think it was a good week. It shocked the hell out of a lot of people. David, the world is changing rapidly. That's not me. That is the first line in the press release from the Prime Minister on this. And I think everything that we've been talking about, even before Donald Trump was sworn in, we always joke about how many Friday afternoons he's blown up our topics for discussion here. Everything has been revolving around that. The Prime Minister's travel. There's even, if you look at Ontario, the Provincial Economic Development Minister doing the same type of thing. But as a Liberal, this is huge. And I used to complain about treating Alberta like a flyover state, is what they, what they talk about in the United States, the difference between the Democrats and coastal and Republicans in the heartland. And we talked a lot about it, and I'll give, Justin Trudeau credit. He did, he started there in different things, different campaigns. But this is pretty direct. Right. And I think the challenge is for a lot of people, you've gotten what you wanted. Now you're kind of quiet. So is this about partisanship? Or is this about the future of the country and growing the economy? So I think this is huge, absolutely huge.
Okay, so Fred, yes, Greg refers to Alberta as a flyover province, often because Liberals flew over to British Columbia where they win seats. And they have 20 of them right now. And this is not necessarily popular there. So, I mean, just sticking with the Liberals for right now, good week or a bad week for them? Because some parts of the electoral map could really shift out of this. Yeah,
I think it's going to remain to be seen how this plays out nationally and over time. It's certainly a big shift. Historically, the Liberals used to do decent in Alberta until a number of decades ago, and Pierre Trudeau brought in some very anti-energy policies and did a lot of damage to the province and really turned the province against Liberals for generations. So this is some kind of, an attempt to reverse that. Good policy, though, is good politics, and this could work. Not just in Alberta, though. This is the type of announcement that has impacts across the board. There's going to be, if we get this pipeline built, Ontarians and Atlantic Canadians and other Canadians could benefit from these jobs and what comes from it. So on that aspect, it could be a good week for the Liberals. But to the points that we've been hearing, the Liberal coalition as it currently exists is a coalition that has dominated the progressive flanks in this country for the last election, especially. They're at risk now, not just BC and Quebec, but in other parts of the country where progressive voters that left the NDP, that left the Bloc Québécois, because they wanted to vote Liberal in this last election, those could be up for grabs again. And Steven Guilbeault resigning, he's the face of the Liberal Party in Quebec. He's the Quebec lieutenant. He was Carney's top guy in the leadership race, not just the election. Him leaving gives a wide open point of attack now for the Bloc Québécois. We're going into an election in Quebec this year in a referendum if the PQ win. So look, things could get really, really testy for the Liberal Party.
So Mel, just staying on the Liberals for a sec, this is what I wonder about, because I've been talking to a bunch of people who've worked on all the 4 election campaigns that they've won since 2015. There's limited upside in Ontario and in the Atlantic on this, just because there's not that many more seats to gain out east. There's real downside in Quebec, real downside in British Columbia. I don't know what the growth potential is in Alberta, but where do you think this potentially leaves them politically? Because they've lost a minister over this and really surprised some people, including their own MPs.
And could be really damaging in Ontario, in places like Toronto and places like Ottawa. Minister Guilbeault gave the Prime Minister credibility where he didn't necessarily have some, not just on the Quebec front, but on the environment front. So this could be massive. But what I find particularly interesting is, and we've talked about this a little bit a few times, of where the Prime Minister continues to act like a CEO and he's not acting like a Prime Minister. We're not seeing the collaboration with caucus. We're not seeing the bringing his people in, giving them the information that they need before he makes these big decisions. And I think we saw that in a real way this week, not just with BC caucus, but I think we saw that in a real way with allies in the climate environment space. We saw this with the BC government. We saw this with Premier Eby, of not necessarily understanding what the government's doing and why, and not having the communication of, here's what we're doing. I keep going back to, we have not been able to build a pipeline in this country. We have not been able to successfully work with industry and First Nations to move ahead a natural resources project, except for in one province, and that's in British Columbia. And the NDP government in British Columbia has so many projects in the pipeline right now that will bring billions of dollars to our economy, and this hypothetical pipeline in Alberta is now going to put all of that at risk. And again, hypothetical, because there's no private partner that stepped out and said that they want to do this. And from what I understand, there isn't anybody kind of raising their hand saying we want to do this. So I find it fascinating that we have a Prime Minister who wants to improve our economy, who is putting billions of dollars at risk by going ahead with this week. I find that fascinating from a political standpoint, from a let's invest in Canada standpoint, and also from a how do we work the provinces to get this done. This seems to me for really small potatoes, and it seems just, I don't understand what they're thinking, and I don't understand where they're going with this.
Well, look, if they got a pipeline, I don't know if it would be small potatoes economic. No, I know what you mean. No, but in terms of what is guaranteed to come out of this. But, you know, Greg, there's further rolling back of like clean electricity regulations, a lower industrial carbon price, you know, Pathways is now contingent on a pipeline and vice versa. And it was enough for Steven Guilbeault to quit. I mean, what are your, I know this is a very different management style with a very different set of priorities and a very different global reality. But where do you think that is going to sit with the Liberal base? Never mind the electorate, but like caucus and people who go out and knock on doors and raise money for the Liberals.
In that list, though, am I wrong? I thought there was, in addition, a reduction in methane emissions. There was an increase.
They got Alberta to agree to something
there was an increase.
They were going to do nationally anyway. Do you know what I mean? Like I mean, Steven Guilbeault doesn't quit if it nets out.
Yeah, and there was also an increase in the industrial carbon price.
No, it's $40 lower than it was going to be under the old provision. It's just they couldn't get Alberta to play ball. You know, like they got movement, but it's weaker than what they were hoping to do before.
Okay.
You know?
Listen, I don't want to be unkind to Guilbeault, but I sat here in February of 24 when he was Minister of Environment, and he talked about another person's portfolio, and he said no more major highway projects in Canada. And Fred and I are from a province. I know that Fred promised a major highway project when he ran. So did the person who ran against him. It's since been built. I don't come from a place with a lot of extra transit. He also did that on a day, stepping out in another person's portfolio when Seamus O'Regan was going to announce the changes around carbon pricing. So he stepped on that announcement as well. So look, there is a thing in Canadian media, and it's not anyone's fault with the reduction, but we have this tendency to be only able to say one story, tell one story at a time, and then not completely. So I get that he's leaving cabinet, and it's time to pay tribute as well. But I'm also finding it very funny that there's a lot of people that were very unhappy with him in his roles, in cabinet, that all of a sudden don't seem to want to talk about their previous statements on this. I don't think, the Prime Minister has been, elected with this cabinet for about 6 months, and people keep throwing around the word lieutenant. I don't, I know that Pablo Rodriguez was Trudeau's lieutenant. I remember Fred and I talking about this, trying to understand what the appeal for Guilbeault was in Quebec, and the way it was explained to me by the Trudeau folks was in centres where there was a cultural element, there was a university, he was very, very popular. So I just find this tendency to run to one side of a story or another. I don't feel like we're giving, the whole story. I am not a huge fan of Danielle Smith's. I think that's been pretty clear. I don't like when I see intelligent people talk about conspiracy theories like chemtrails. But I have heard over and over again that this is what the Liberal Party needs to do. And this is what Prime Minister Carney is supposed to do. In BC, last year, none of those 7 MPs that were going to get re-elected would have gotten re-elected under Justin Trudeau. They got re-elected and 13 more came on board. People are pragmatic. The Prime Minister absolutely has to do a better job of selling everything. We talked about this 2 weeks ago with the budget. There's a message there, but I'm finding some of it, we're leaving a lot of the details out.
Well, maybe. We haven't yet spoken to Steven Guilbeault. He is going to be on Tualaman on Parle on Sunday night, so I'll be curious to see what he has to say there. So he will speak for himself. But Fred, I have to ask, as the party of pipelines, boy, the Conservatives have very little to say, turning down multiple opportunities to come on this show and other shows. They're not doing interviews on this thing. Is this a good week or a bad week for Pierre Poilievre and the Conservatives, as Mark Carney is now BFFs with Danielle Smith and the champion of a pipeline, potentially?
Yeah, I think it matters and how it plays out. Again, it's a similar answer to the first thing. What happens, or to the first time I spoke on this, what happens to that Liberal vote? Is there going to be a collapse of their progressive flank to the NDP and the Bloc? And if that does happen, there's a lot of vote splitting that will benefit Conservatives. So politically on that side. But it's interesting, they haven't been very vocal on this yet. My friends in the party. And it reminds me back to the carbon tax. It was Pierre Poilievre and the team who hammered Trudeau on carbon tax. And when Carney, I think the first day as Prime Minister, wrote it out of existence, and that Conservatives made a strategic mistake by saying, well, it's not really gone, instead of doing a victory lap on it. So I bet you they're a bit gun shy right now and trying to figure out exactly how do they message on this, because that is something they're going to have to figure out. It really does change the game in many ways, though.
Yeah, well, it changes the game in a, like, is there vulnerability now for the Conservatives in Alberta, maybe, like that it could, in Calgary and Edmonton, maybe, for the Liberals to grow? I don't know.
I think the vulnerability still remains mostly with the Liberal Party and losing that progressive flank. I think that's where the risk is for any of the parties. I don't see it in Alberta where the Conservatives would lose anything. Edmonton is, if you look at the city of Edmonton, provincially, we call it Redmonton, and it's a very NDP-friendly area. So there is always potential for growth there for one of the parties. But again, with the NDP and the Bloc likely coming up a bit in the polls, I think the risk is with the Liberals overall. Particularly with this is so far away from anything being built. This is theoretical in terms of it's out there, and the Liberals are now tying themselves to it, but nothing will be built for a long time.
Yeah, at the earliest, Mel, I think we were told in the technical briefing, shovels in the ground, the magical shovels in the magical ground by 2029. And then who knows from there. But, Fred says they call it Redmonton, even though elects the Democrats, and they're orange, last I checked, unless you've changed that as well. Let's how do you see it for the Conservatives and for the New Democrats? Because Lower Mainland BC, I mean, that could be the path back to official party status, depending on how this goes.
Lower Mainland BC, we can finally pick up seats in Montreal, Toronto, Halifax even. These are all places where we have historically held seats, we have historically done well, and where action on climate is really important to a lot of folks and to a lot of people who go back between. That's where the most of the red-orange vote lives, is in those places. So yeah, for sure, that could be huge for the NDP. And it's not funny, but I was around for the last few elections, and every time we would go to talk about our climate policy or our climate plank and the things that we wanted to do, stakeholders didn't want to come near us. They didn't want to say that this was a good plan. They didn't want to stand with us because they were so sold on the idea and so hopeful about the work that the Liberals were doing. What I saw from all those folks in the last few days is how much they enjoy working with Steven Guilbeault, how he was a man of principle, and how that was what was guiding him every step of the way. Where does that go? Who do those people work with now that he's out of cabinet and they see the Prime Minister signing this MOU with Premier Smith? I think that that's a massive opportunity for the NDP. I will caveat it, though, with we have had a challenge in the last few years to talk about how we beat the climate crisis while also helping put money back in people's pockets. And I think that the opportunity there is to do both things and to not only just get progressives who care about this, but to talk about it that way to kind of bring people on side of the NDP. For the Conservatives, sorry, I went way into where the opportunity for the NDP is.
That's where I wanted you to go.
Okay,
It's like
perfect.
we're a little bit tight on time because we had
yeah.
a whole bunch of stuff at the front end. But you know, Greg, there is this realignment obviously happening in the Liberal Party to more of a centrist, you know, economically focused party. And the argument is the U.S. has changed everything, so we can't keep doing things in the old ways. How the voting coalition realized, though, still is not clear, right? So this is the risk that I don't think there's a caucus revolt, but the risk now is in the constituencies and how they feel about this change.
So I was stopped today by a former provincial senior official, elected official, who from the Chrétien, you know, was active in the Chrétien and Martin era, and they said to me, you know, Greg, one of the things I'm bothered by is people saying that you know, the Liberals are moving to the right, and he said the Liberals are moving to the center. And for people like me, who I moved here to work for Prime Minister Paul Martin, wasn't as long as I would have liked. That's how we see this. I watched a reporter who's only been around the Hill for a very short period of time talking about how this is, you know, like the Liberals are running away. Like I wouldn't even say the 10 years. Once Trudeau got into minority, and then once we get into supply and confidence deal, there was a big shift to the left in the Liberal Party.
Pretty far left, yeah.
And a lot of us were uncomfortable with that, but we were putting water in our wine because of things like the pandemic. So there is a realignment, but for some of us, we feel that we are supposed to be in the center, and the center is always defined by who you are facing on the other side. We see Pierre Poilievre moving their party to the right. And listen, I paid defense now for 3 rounds.
Oh, your government.
Poilievre, I'm wondering if he's happy that he picked an Alberta riding to run in, because he is so far away from Danielle Smith right now. It's not funny. And this is really awkward. You mentioned earlier, the Conservatives are being really, really quiet. There is a mischief here that could be a lot of fun, could be a lot of, you know, very delicious for the people who really enjoy this, that, you know, in Pierre's own party, who are trying to wonder, am I an Alberta Conservative supporting Pierre Poilievre? No, because I'm supporting Danielle Smith, and she's doing what I want her to do.
Right, and he's calling it a meaningless MOU, Fred, which Danielle Smith is trying to sell to the United Conservative Party conference, and they booed the idea. And you know, it has led a meaningless MOU, which has led to the resignation of Steven Guilbeault. So it's not quite a meaningless thing. I've spoken to Conservatives who think Pierre Poilievre maybe should have embraced this, to say this is a good thing and maybe he can move ahead, but they just don't think he can do that with Mark Carney and with the Liberal government. Your quick thoughts on that?
Well, it goes back to what I said about the carbon tax, and that, you know, he could have claimed victory for that and didn't. So this could have been something there, perhaps, and we'll see how this completely unfolds. But just going back quickly to what Greg said about the Liberals shifting, this is a big shift for the Liberals. Trudeau moved this party to the far left for a long time. This was the value proposition that they pushed out there election over election. It would almost be like the NDP coming out now saying they're going to get rid of the labor code, or Conservatives saying, hey, we're going to bring back a long gun registry to go after hunters and farmers. That's just not something that parties can do and expect some kind of recoil. There's going to be something happening here with the electorate that's going to shift because of this, and where it goes, we'll have to see.
Right, and so Mel, you're going to get the last word, but it's like the parties are, well, the Liberal Party is realigning. I think the electorate, we saw it in the election, it moved, it realigned. I think it's still not settled. Like, the approval ratings for the Prime Minister are high. Who knows how the splits will go in the next election. But where do you see this potentially landing over the next while? Because Trump has disrupted so many things, but also the voting intentions and desires and tolerances of Canadian voters.
And if this government lasts, they may not face Trump in the next election. So what does that look like? I still think many people in my universe are not having kids because they're worried about the environment. They're worried about the climate crisis. Even more so, younger people. A lot of those folks lined up with the Liberals in the last election because they thought that they had a plan. They believed they had a plan. They wanted to believe so badly that they had a plan and that Mark Carney was the man to face Trump. I think that totally debalances this with the new policy. And I also think, the electorate changed after the last election. I don't think that that's a solid change. I think that was a moment in time. Everywhere we went, people said, we're voting for this guy because we're terrified, but not we're voting for this guy because we're now Liberals. So I think that this helps shift things in a different way, and hopefully my friends are able to seize on it.
Okay, we got to leave it there. Fred, Greg, Mel. Greg, didn't mean to put you on defense, but you guys are the main characters this week. It's just one of those things.
I can take it, David.
All right. I promise we'll have more time for this next week.